Welcome back. Welcome back to the program. I'm Dan Maduri, broadcasting across the I-4 corridor, helping you solve the world's problems 3 hours at a time. And the NFL has announced that they would like superstar artists to pay in order to perform at the Super Bowl halftime show. The three artists being Rihanna, Katy Perry, and Coldplay obviously took this news not well. And one individual, Forbes contributor and 20-year advertising vet, Will Burns, has come out and said the NFL has turned the Super Bowl halftime show into one giant ad and that there's no other way to look at it. Joining us on the phone right now is Will Burns. Will, how are you?
Good. How are you, Dan?
Doing well. So what was your initial thought when you heard that the NFL was thinking about turning the halftime show and making artists pay for play?
Well, my first thought was that maybe they hadn't thought it quite through. And what I mean by that is, here you've got the NFL. They're amazing at making money, monetizing their product. They've got an amazing product, by the way, and I think they have every right to monetize it in any way that they can, practically get away with legally. But when I heard yesterday on a sports radio talk show that the NFL is going to ask these artists, I mean, these are artists that are, like Paul McCartney and Coldplay. These are big-time players. And to ask them to pay to play on the halftime, to me, just struck the completely wrong chord, pardon the pun. Mm-hmm. And so, I just started thinking about it, like, what are the ramifications of this, seemingly little decision? And I think the ramifications may be huge.
Yeah, but from an NFL standpoint, they're saying, look, we're taking you and we're putting you in front of at least 115 million people. You'll make money somewhere else down the line. You need to do this for us. No, absolutely, and that is true. But at the same time, look at who they're asking. They're asking acts that don't need it. Yeah.
They don't need the Super Bowl. Coldplay certainly doesn't need the Super Bowl to enjoy more success. Neither does Rihanna or Katy Perry. Certainly not Paul McCartney, though he's not on the table this week, but just to kind of emphasize the point.
I think Madonna, Beyonce, and those were also past Super Bowl performers.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, to me, it's the power of these performers are in direct proportion to the amount the NFL needs them. They need to have a great performer in there. And so now you go to these egos and you ask them to pay. I think it's going to be very difficult for the NFL to find somebody who's great, who's willing to play, and have that stigma.
It's almost like now the NFL halftime show will be about breaking acts instead of just adding to what a great cultural event the Super Bowl actually is.
Yeah, totally. I mean, think about just yourself as I presume, a fan. I'm certainly a fan of football, and I'm a big fan of music. I've got worked with artists in my past from a marketing standpoint, so I have a soft spot in my heart for what they go through. And if you were to realize that this halftime show, this particular act had to pay to play, I think it will change the way you perceive that performance just a little bit.
Yeah.
And on top of that, what could be worse, just from a bottom line standpoint, and again, I don't think the NFL really thought this through, is that they're basically giving advertisers who are going to have to fork up their own money, which they would normally do. Pepsi spent, multi-million dollars sponsoring the halftime show last year. Well, now they're basically sponsoring an ad. If it's Coldplay, they're sponsoring an ad for Coldplay because Coldplay is paying.
Yeah.
And the NFL is essentially double dipping. They're charging the act to perform, and they're charging the advertisers to advertise in what's essentially an advertorial, infomercial for the band.
Mm-hmm. And just from the public relations standpoint, couldn't this also be perceived as a giant company, the NFL, a not-for-profit company, the NFL, which had revenues in the $9 billion range just last year? Couldn't this be perceived from a PR standpoint of this is just more greed from these guys?
Oh, totally. I think anything that any company does these days to make more money is perceived that way, unfortunately. I mean, I'm a capitalist. I believe that companies should try to make as much money as they can. I think that's the best thing for our economy. And I think the NFL has that right, too. That said, there is something, even I would admit, there's something different about this kind of transaction, making the artist pay to play the halftime show, just seems like they've gone a little too far.
Yeah, it's almost an ego, just driven totally by ego. Like, we're the NFL, we're the biggest thing in the whole world. And yeah, Coldplay, you've got global shows. You got $200 million whenever you go and tour the world, but we're the NFL, so bow down to us.
Yeah, there is a sort of mine is bigger than yours sort of confrontation. This sort of begs.
We're talking to Will Birds, Forbes contributor, 20-year advertising vet on Florida Live. I'm Dan Maduri. Will making artists pay for play at the Super Bowl halftime, will that reduce the value of Super Bowl ads?
I think it could. In the actual amount of money that advertisers will have to pay. And this is total speculation. I'm completely off the reservation with this kind of speculation. But, again, they could make the conclusion, the advertisers could, that, hey, NFL, you're making money now on the acts, you know. So if I'm going to advertise on their advertisement, then I shouldn't have to pay as much. It's not the same product anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, because there used to be a purity, and I succumb to this too. That I don't know how they made the decisions every year to put this particular artist at the halftime show, but I trusted that it was a pure mechanism that did it, and it was based on performance and success of that particular artist. Look at Bruno Mars, 2013; he was on fire.
Yeah.
So it made sense that he would be on the Super Bowl this past year, and I applaud him for that. That's like, you know, a football team making it to the Super Bowl. It's an artist who makes it to the Super Bowl, and I think that's wonderful. But now, if they do go through with this and they force these artists to pay, all that magic, that whole house of cards of sort of knighting this artist as the performer of the year that played that, it all goes away. It's all now just a stupid transaction.
And so now so you basically take the halftime show, you turn it into just business, but also you run the risk of reducing just straight up the quality of acts.
I think that's true, because now you know that Coldplay paid to be on, so it's not for real. You know, they didn't really get chosen for the halftime show. They had to pay to. And that kind of language, you know, that's going to be all over the place in social media. You just know it. And I don't know. I'm not going to go so far as to say that viewership will go down or anything like that, but I do think that the NFL may have given advertisers some leverage to try to reduce the cost of their, you know, buying out that halftime show like Pepsi did last year.
Could that be a driving force that the NFL knows that their advertisers are going to they just to appease them, because they keep jacking up the price on the advertisers? So they're basically saying, you know what, we'll find another revenue source somewhere. Therefore, we can keep your advertising down because it's getting a little bit much.
I really don't think so. I think the NFL is driven by bottom line. Again, as they should. I'm not knocking them for that. That's their prerogative. But I don't think that they have any sympathy for the advertisers. I think if they could charge $8 million for a 30-second spot, they would. And, you know, wait 5 years, and they probably will.
Yeah. So I'm also wondering to myself, normally artists, Coldplay, Rihanna, they're more of loving people, just the whole idea of being an artist, providing, performing, things of that nature. But if they decided, you know what, forget the NFL, this is ridiculous, how dare they try to do this to us, and egos start clashing, is there a way that the artists actually could turn this on the NFL and fight back in some way?
You read my article, didn't you?
Of course I did.
Yes. Well, I had a thought, and that was that, you know, if you're one of these artists, I read in the Wall Street Journal that they responded in a, quote, chilly way to this offer, and I'm not surprised at all. If you're one of these artists, this idea of being on the show, the halftime show, went from being an honor to being an insult, you know. And so what I would do if I were them is, number one, say no. Don't do it, any of you. And number 4, 5, and 6 on the list say no. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 say no. And do a concert at the exact same time as the halftime show on February 1st, pitch the idea to CBS or ABC because the Super Bowl is on NBC, and invite advertisers to advertise on that show for half the price as they would on the Super Bowl. And I guarantee you that the sheer magnitude of the fan power of those 3 acts alone would create enough social media buzz and hype that it would be an epic battle of performances between
awesome.
Wouldn't it be? It would be the Super Bowl around the Super Bowl between whatever lame act decides to decide, to pay to play versus all these others that are rebelling that are the true artists. I think it would just be awesome.
Yeah, and if I'm the other network that is not carrying the Super Bowl, I'm getting on the horn right now and saying, hey, guess what? We got a grand idea just to go and compete up against the NFL and be that one network and say, hey, for a moment in time, we beat the NFL in the ratings.
Yeah, totally. And it would be a way for the artists. I mean, think about what the artist has been going through the last 20 years.
Yeah.
They've been getting it from every single direction, whether it was iTunes or whether it's these record contracts. They're not making money the way they used to make, or Spotify, where they're making, fractions of cents per listen. They're getting squeezed. And I know they're big, fat entertainers, and they're probably, filthy rich. But at the same time, the average artist is really getting squeezed. So this would be an opportunity for the artists to fight back. And who better to take on than the NFL, which is already sort of all about, gridiron, fighting each other in competition. And, these artists are going to take them on financially right where it hurts, and that's the pocketbook. I would love it.
Yeah, I would love it too. And also what I'd also love to see is that if all these powerful artists got together and said, we're going to put on our own halftime show on another network, we're going to cut everybody in equally, and we can all make a bunch of money doing it, I'd like to see what act or which band would accept the NFL's offer to play at halftime. Who would be the one to cross, say, the picket line fence, the line in the sand?
Yeah, totally. It'd probably be some, grandmother banjo band from Tennessee.
Some indie rock band that nobody's ever heard of, but your cousin's friend.
Exactly. It would be too embarrassing. It really, honestly, would be too embarrassing. I think they'd get blackballed by the industry, in as much as the industry can blackball an artist.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Will Burns, Forbes contributor, thank you very much for taking the time. I enjoyed it.
Oh, me too. Thanks for having me.